My roommates and I made a terrible mistake letting this guy move in. And now I'm desperate to get him out of my life. I live in a 3-bedroom apartment with usually only 2 other people. But recently one of them asked if a colleague of theirs could move in for a month or 2 and set up in the living room. They said that he was willing to pay rent and would be out as soon as possible. We all agreed, because the sound of paying less rent for a bit sounded nice, and none of us used the living room anyway. As soon as this guy moved in, he became a huge problem. He'd leave piss on the toilet, leave dirty cups and plates all over the place, played music on his speaker at all kinds of hours, and in general was just a mess of a person. I couldn't even walk into the kitchen without him trauma dumping his entire life on me. I'd just nod my head along and slowly walk back to my room. He was, in general, exhausting. We bought him a curtain to set up along the living room wall so he'd have some privacy, but he never put it up. This was a problem because the guy insisted on sleeping naked, and he'd never put on boxers when he went to the bathroom. Eventually we put the curtain up for him because we were sick of getting flashed all the time. I personally hated the dude because one day he randomly decided my dog preferred him to me. He kept trying to take her for walks without my permission. He tried to get her to sleep with him at night, which never worked out because she prefers her crate. When we had our daily training session, he'd interrupt and tell me I was doing everything wrong and insist on taking over. It was actually a bit funny when he would randomly try to prove he could handle her better. She tends to follow me around the house, so when he'd see her he'd order her to sit, stay or come over to him, which she never did even once. She tended to ignore him, and I don't really blame her since he smelt so bad. Finally rent day came. We usually pay $900 each for rent, but we told the guy from the start he only had to pay $400 each month since he didn't have his own room, and we understood he was saving up for a place. Of course, he only handed over $200. He said work was tough and he'd pay us back in payment plans to make up for it. My roommate, who was in charge of the bills, said it would be fine and he'd cover for him until he could pay him back. I didn't hold my breath. It only got really bad the very next week, when this dude messed up twice in very big ways. The first was when my roommate who handles the bills brought his new girlfriend over for the first time. She seemed like a nice girl and she even offered to cook dinner for all of us, which I thought was sweet. In came the mess of a man, drunk and shirtless, who saw the girlfriend and immediately made a dash for her. He was all up in her space, and made a lot of comments about her body. My roommate didn't seem to care, so I stepped in and told him he needed to give her some room to breathe. He shoved me in the chest and started yelling at me. He went on a rant about how I thought I was better than him because I could afford food and a car and he couldn't. He said I'd never understand the trauma he went through growing up with parents who didn't care about him, and how no one wanted to give him a good job. I legit looked this man in the eye and told him he had no right to assume his life was more difficult than anyone else's, that he knew nothing and needed to stop the woes of me act, because it did nothing but make him seem like a moocher for attention. At this point the girlfriend just grabbed her purse and left. I really don't blame her. I tried to leave myself, when the guy physically stopped me and asked if I wanted to fight. I turned to my roommate that had invited him here, and told him to do something about this drunk mess because I wasn't anyone's parent here. My roommate went over and talked to the guy, and he calmed down. By the next day it seemed like he either forgot, or was pretending the previous day hadn't happened. I couldn't tell you which. Then 2 days later I came home from work to find vomit throughout the house. At first I thought it was the dude, but then I saw my dog in my bedroom throwing up. I got really worried and rushed her to the vet. I texted my roommates to ask what happened, and one texted back saying the guy woke up and found spilled dry spaghetti noodles all over the floor. I told the vet and they said she was probably just dehydrated. They did some tests, and ended up pumping some water into the back of her neck to help her rehydrate. They said she looked like a camel with the bump for a while, but that it would go down and help her. I brought her back home and found the vomit still there, so I cleaned it up. I went to the others and asked who the hell left a box of spaghetti open, where my dog could reach it. The mess of a guy said he had left the pantry cabinet door open, but it wasn't his fault, my dog was so badly trained. I effing lost it. Our pantry door closes automatically. The only way my dog could have gotten in there was if it was propped open. I ran forward to punch the guy, but was stopped by my 2 roommates, who told him to take a walk so they could talk to me. As soon as he left I told them I wanted him gone. He was a disgusting slob who did nothing for himself or the house, and hadn't even paid rent. He harassed the girlfriend earlier, and now it seems like he poisoned my dog. They agreed with me that he needed to leave. My roommate who brought him here apologized about ever bringing him into our lives. We settled on him having until the end of the month to get TF out, and that he still owed us rent. My roommate in charge of the money offered to tell him, and I agreed. Only the next day, that very same roommate asked for us all to gather to talk to him, only to find out he did not stick to the plan. Apparently the guy gave him a whole sob story, so he told him he could stay for an entire extra month after the end of this one, and he didn't have to pay any rent for past or present time he stayed here. I was so angry I burst out laughing. Like, I couldn't breathe type laughing. I told him absolutely not. The only reason I agreed to let this guy stay here was so I could have a break on rent for a while. Now, thanks to him I owe hundreds of dollars in vet fees, and gained my own kind of trauma from dealing with his sorry butt. I am not okay at all with allowing him to stay longer than ever agreed upon, plus I'd have to pay a regular amount of rent while dealing with his bull? No, not happening. My roommate turned to the other one to back him up, but surprisingly he agreed with me. He said he regretted ever bringing the guy up, and he should have been kicked out a long time ago. The only reason he thought it was a good idea from the start was for the lower rent cost for a bit. I told my roommate he needed to either go back and tell him the actual deal, or he'd be paying for the guy's portion of rent on top of his own, because I would only be sending him the amount we agreed to when he moved in. He tried to argue with us, saying it wasn't fair to place him in such a bad position. I told him, you did it to yourself for falling for a sob story from a manipulator who literally harassed your girlfriend. He told us once again the entire situation was unfair. I told him, I absolutely agree. So not only will I only pay the agreed upon amount, but I will be minusing the cost of the vet bill as well for my rent, since you clearly want to help this man with his financial issues so badly. I just got up and left. My other roommate shrugged, apologized again, and walked away too. When rent time came I ended up paying him only the agreed upon amount, not minus the vet bill, as I thought that was going too far. I wrote a note and attached it to the guy's curtain that he has only 7 more days to leave or he'd find all his stuff on a curb outside. 3 days later the guy finally left. None of us have interacted with one another since. We're all still pissed at one another and I don't know if that's ever gonna change.